This is 911. Do you have an emergency?
Today on Rescue 911, a hidden crevasse takes a downhill skier prisoner deep below the surface.
We thought maybe he's dead.
Be there as fellow skiers attempt to save their friend's life.
I knew it was a race against time, and every minute felt like an hour.
Then, over a ton of shattered glass buries a factory worker alive.
I believe he's gonna die right there.
On Rescue 911.
On April 4th, 1991, near Zermatt, Switzerland, Daniel Weber and a group of friends set out to ski the magnificent mountain glaciers in that area of the Alps. All 6 were experienced skiers who respected the dangerous beauty of the slopes, but felt prepared for the challenge that awaited them.
When you go ski touring, you walk very slow, so you have time to see all the areas and the mountains. It's a very spectacular view. But we plan always to ski very careful. You have to take care about all the crevasses. This is the dangerous thing on glaciers. You can fall in.
Leading the group of skiers that day was Christian Brunner.
I was the link between, on the one side, the group of volleyball player friends, Jörg and Jens, and on the other hand, I had a group of my mountaineering friends, Daniel, Marcus and Tom. The weather was nice and clear, the sun was shining, we could enjoy the sights, the view. It was a wonderful feeling, especially for Jens and Jörg, because it was the first time that they had been on the top of a mountain that was 13,000 feet high.
On top we had a little meal, looked around the area and enjoyed all of this. And before we skied down, there was a bigger group with a mountain guide, and they also started skiing down. If you go down from the mountain, in this case it's just one way, and it's the trail you went up. And because Jörg and Jens, this was the first time skiing down a glacier. And so we told them to stay on the trail, because there you can be more sure that under the trail is no crevasses.
Hey, der Jörg! Jens, der Jörg ist in der Gletscherspalte gefallen!
I thought it's about 5 meters steep, not more. So we thought, yeah, okay, it's no problem. But we looked into the hole and it was so deep, and it was a shock. We thought maybe he's dead.
When we continue.
Christian, Daniel, we all were frightened.
Because we couldn't help him. Jörg was already frozen, to be honest.
The expert mountaineers had brought ice climbing gear in case of an emergency. While they tried to reach Jörg, someone else skied to the group ahead and told their guide what had happened. The guide radioed the Air Zermatt rescue team, and a helicopter was dispatched to the scene.
Unterkühlung bedeutet, dass die Körpertemperatur.
If a person is exposed to freezing temperature, that means that the temperature of the body will sink to a dangerous degree. And if it reaches that degree for any length of time, then that means that the heart and the body functions will simply stop.
Setzt ein Herzstillstand ein. Weil ich eben wusste, es ist ein...
I knew it was a race against time, and every minute felt like an hour.
Jens Solhofer lowered two friends into the crack in the glacier.
I was scared. Christian and Daniel, we all were frightened. We realized we would have big problems to get him up by ourselves.
Ich bin nicht mehr weit von dir, siehst du mich?
The first when I saw him, I saw that it's serious because we couldn't help him. Jörg was already frozen into the ice.
It took half an hour for them to get to Jörg. Although he was lodged 75 feet below the surface, he was still alive.
In dem Moment kam bei mir etwas Panik auf.
At that moment, I slightly panicked because I didn't see any way of getting him out of there. He was really trapped. He told me, I can't breathe. I'm so squeezed in. I can't get any air.
Du, ich glaube, der Rucksack behindert dich. Ich versuche dich auch zu lösen.
Mach schnell!
Danny, ich brauche ein Taschenmesser!
It was frustrating for me because we could just talk with Jörg and not help more. And Jörg actually talked about dying. Because the crevasse was rounded, he couldn't see the sky, nothing. It was just ice, snow.
Because of strong winds, it took the helicopter more than an hour to reach the scene. Among those who responded was Alpine ski guide Kurt Lauber.
You have to be really lucky that you can survive if you fell into a crevasse. I don't know, maybe it goes 50 to 50% that you survive or that you die.
Eine Zeit lang hat Jörg vom...
There was a time when Jörg talked about giving up. He said, I must go to sleep. I'm feeling faint. There's no sense in struggling on. I'm never going to get out of here. And then Daniel shouted down, come on, Jörg, behave yourself. You can't go to sleep. You must fight.
We was working with a small ice axe because as long as he sees that something is going on, he's not so afraid. The first thing what I thought was that we need to have an air hammer because there was no way, no chance to get him out without the air hammer because his hands, his boots, and also his skis, they went stuck into the ice.
By the time an air hammer arrived at the accident scene, Jörg had been trapped for more than 2 hours.
With the air hammers, they could break out big pieces of ice. They worked slowly, but they had to do it very safe. They were being as careful as possible.
Jörg had been pinned between the walls of ice for nearly 5 hours when rescuers finally freed him enough so that they could try to lift him out.
Jörg told us that he's not feeling his legs. So we thought maybe his back is broken. And if you are not really careful, they may be paralyzed afterwards.
Jörg war fast leichenblass. Hatte ganz...
Jörg was almost as pale as death. His lips were a deep purple, his eyes half closed. The freezing was taking its toll. Hypothermia was near.
Emergency medicine specialist Dr. Axel Mann had been flown in to treat Jörg as soon as he reached the surface.
In the last half hour that he was in the crevasse, he almost lost his consciousness. That meant that we had to assume that his body temperature had fallen way down below the critical point of 80 degrees. That meant that there was an absolute danger of Jörg losing his life.
We could feel the relief of all the people, including the rescue team. He was out there and he was alive. It's like being reborn. It's like second life.
Jorg was transported to a hospital in Visp for treatment. He was released after 3 days with no lasting effects.
Das ist dann wirklich nur noch den Bergführern und auch meinen Kollegen zu verdanken, Daniel.
It is only due to the mountain guides and my friends, like Christian and Daniel, that I am still alive. They constantly encouraged me. They tried to tell me to overcome the situation. They inspired me not to give up. They actually risked their lives for me. So I'm certain that without these people, I wouldn't be here today. I would not have survived.
If you go mountaineering, teamwork is very important. So for me, it's normal if you go to the mountains together, then you help together. And for us, it was just the right thing to do when we were down there. We had no thoughts about being heroes or something like this. It was just the right way. And afterwards, I feel like Clint Eastwood.
Man sollte
Just because an accident like this one happened, one shouldn't now have the feeling or impression that it's very risky to go on ski tours and to ski in the free nature. All in all, a ski tour is surely still less dangerous than driving a car.
Next.
The glass is very sharp. I've heard about people being cut in half, and it'll cut you just by looking at it.
Even though some jobs pose very real dangers, it's hard to believe that anything bad will ever happen to us or those we care about. But on December 23rd, 1991, Richard Adams and the employees at a factory in Wilsonville, Oregon, were reminded just how real those dangers can be.
We've taken free-fall sheets of glass that are 102 inches tall by 130 inches long. We just push them over onto an air table. It'll cut any size.
Richard Adams had worked in the glass cutting department for nearly 5 years.
They can break at any time. I've seen a lot of those happen. I've had them come down on top of me before. It's a dangerous occupation.
The lead man that shift was Kevin Smith.
The glass is very sharp, sharper than a razor blade. I've heard about people being cut in half, and it'll cut you just by looking at it.
The glass comes from the manufacturer in 10-foot-long cases that weigh nearly 2 tons.
Hey, Greg.
I asked Craig, I said, well, why don't you go back and open up another case? And he just said, okay, no problem, just like we do 100 times, all the time.
Plant manager Larry Henry noticed a commotion on the floor of the factory.
People were scrambling, and I immediately knew something was wrong.
I'll get the boom.
When I found him, he was still conscious, and he was reaching his arms underneath the case and trying to lift it off of himself. He was trying to lift 3,000 pounds off of himself. And then he just turned white and passed out.
The call for help sent units with the Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue heading to the scene.
I knew instantly we had to get that glass off Craig, and if we didn't have that glass off of him, by the time the paramedics arrived, he wasn't going to make it.
My biggest concern was keeping that other pack of glass from falling down on top of everybody. That'd cut somebody in two, falling from that high of a distance.
Within 5 minutes of the call, rescue units arrived at the factory.
I was worried about what they were going to find when they did unbury him. I thought at that point that I wouldn't have him as a friend anymore.
Among the rescuers who responded was paramedic Gene Ditter.
He was not breathing and he had no pulse. At that time is when we actually put life flight on standby.
Hey, we got that other bottle of oxygen.
Paramedic Tom Duffy administered CPR.
We were very concerned because when you have a trauma patient that doesn't have a pulse or isn't breathing, statistically less than 1 in 100 patients will survive. And we really felt that there was very little chance that we would be able to resuscitate Craig.
I was scared. It just seemed to me that he wasn't going to make it. I'd never seen anything like that up close and personal, especially to a good friend. This was 2 days before Christmas. That's the sad part.
Let's check for a pulse again, guys, and see if we've got anything.
His chances of survival are probably very slim, but after looking at the expression on the co-worker's face and everything, we felt that we needed to give it our best shot, not only for Craig, but for the co-workers.
Check for a pulse there, Scott.
When life flight arrived on the scene, the victim had been without a pulse for nearly 8 minutes.
Probably the compression.
The flight nurse brought some medications in so we could get him intubated.
Doing good. Come on, Craig. You're going to make it. Start bagging. You're going to make it, Craig.
And once we got him intubated and that, then we felt we had a good airway. And then at that point, his pulse started to come back a little bit more. It was very faint, but at least we had a pulse.
Craig's wife, Jean, was at home when she received word of the accident.
Oregon Glass called me and told me that his leg was cut. And then a few minutes later, they called me back up and told me that he was going to be life flighted to the hospital. And I knew then it was bad.
Craig Hoffman was admitted to Oregon Health Sciences University Hospital in critical condition and put under the care of Surgeon Donald Trunke.
We suspected that it was pretty severe because of the incredible crush injury that you would get from 4,000 pounds of glass. My major concerns at that time was whether or not he had fatal damage to the brain because he wasn't able to breathe during that time.
Hey, Chase, let's look at this film.
We thought it was a very grim prognosis. There really had never been any signs of, conscious life at the scene. And we certainly didn't see that in the emergency room. But you can't give up at this point in time because you don't know.
Once Craig was out of surgery, his wife and father finally got to see him.
It was the hardest thing for me to go in and see him all hooked up in tubes and wires coming in and out of his body. The doctor told us he would have brain damage, some internal injuries, broken ribs and broken bones throughout his body.
But remarkably, as the days passed, Craig began to improve.
I love you too, honey.
The paramedics and the people at the scene did an incredible job. And so I think if any credit is due, it's to the people at the scene. Fantastic job.
Craig was hospitalized for 2.5 weeks. 9 months later, he has completely recovered from his injuries.
I can honestly say I really wasn't scared, but I said a quick little prayer as I was jumping out of the way, and that's about all I remember until New Year's Day. Somebody said, Happy New Year's. I was wondering what happened to Christmas.
I felt fantastic when I found out he was going to make it and he was going to be okay. And here 6 months later, he's back on the job, doing a little different work, but he's back on the job.
I feel like I'm real lucky to be alive, and I do believe it was a miracle that I am alive. I had a lot of people praying for me. And I would like to thank them for praying for me. It's a hard way to find out who your friends and people that love you are.
Mr. Shapiro, step out of the car, please.